Hello and welcome to episode number 285 of Out There TV, and we're definitely not your evening news.
That's for sure. Evening, everybody, and welcome to the program tonight. A guest you've seen many times on this show, George Green from Idaho. George is a former Illuminati insider. He was rolling with some of the most secretive, high-rolling people on the planet, and he's now a civilian. And boy, what information we've got for you on the show tonight.
We're going to go through a lot of the breaking news that's happened over the last couple of weeks. We're doing this on the 3rd of January, which is important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's the Iowa caucus, where we have heard absolutely nothing about Ron Paul, and I don't think that's because he's not showing anything. I think that the major media has taken upon themselves to make sure that he is not mentioned. So we will be following that, and we will ask George about that. And make sure you also check our website at OutThereTV.com to see the latest breaking news stories that we post a couple of times a week.
And also, when you're on our website, be sure to check out our fabulous streaming video service. All of our show, almost 100 shows are there for your viewing pleasure. I think it's $6.95 a month.
On demand.
And, you know, if you pay for a year, I think you get 3 or 4 months free. So it's a good deal. And you can check out the program whenever you like.
George Green is a former investment banker, real estate developer, and insurance broker. He is currently president of publishing house Global Insights.
George joins us once again for his annual New World Order update tonight with information on our economic plight, including the North American Union, plans for an upcoming police state, and current activities of the Illuminati. And tonight we're grabbing news from the headlines and asking George what they mean to us.
Welcome, George.
Welcome.
Thanks so much for joining us. We have literally millions of new viewers since you were on last year about this time, and we'd just like you to tell them briefly how you got to be on the inside with these Illuminati characters.
Well, as you know, I was a former underwriter of securities, and I was a banker, and I used to sell money to banks across the United States. It's, you know, pre-derivative market when the banks were requesting it. I became very powerful to the point where I could break banks across the United States. And what happened, I was invited to the inner circle. Rather than me breaking banks, they decided to make me part of them. And so that was one of the ways.
So when you got on the outs with them, how did that happen?
Well, I was asked. I attended a special meeting up in Aspen, and when I went up there, I asked, what am I here for? And they said they wanted me to be the finance chairman for the next president of the United States. And I told them, I said, look, I just started this $100 million real estate project. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll put it on ice. And then I asked them who the next president was going to be. And they said, Jimmy Carter. And I said, Jimmy who? And they said, well, he's the Democratic governor of Georgia. And at that point, I said, well, I've been voting Republican. And they said, son, don't worry about it. We control them both.
So you decided that that wasn't something you really wanted to be a part of, and that was basically your financial nemesis.
Well, yeah, that's exactly correct. It was more to it than that. It became very, when I was privy to the information on what they had planned, which is affecting us right now, and remember this was 30 years ago, these people have, it takes a while to put together their program. When they tell what they're going to do, the Global 2000 report, Jimmy Carter put in writing, all congressmen got a copy of it. I have a summary of it on my website, nohoax.com, N-O-H-O-A-X, and can tell you what they have planned.
George, let's move into another direction here. Right now, the real estate nightmare is uppermost in the minds of many people, and some real estate agents are actually blaming the media for the mess. What's really behind this real estate and banking fiasco?
Well, it's a combination of greed and the naivety of the people out here and the availability of cheap money without any requirements to get it. As you know, interest rates dropped down to as little as 1% with no qualifying, but that was just loaning money out there, which drove the real estate market up over the old rules. When I used to have a bank, the most we could loan to a couple for buying a house was 34% of their income. Well, it got up to the point now under where people can buy, use 50% of your income and only state it. And so you could buy $1 million home and pay $1,000 a month payments. Well, the interest rate at 1%, that's one thing. But now that it's currently back up to 6%, all of a sudden we're upside down. Now, I attended a real estate a meeting with some bankers the other day. We're expecting, or they are this year, 6 million houses going into foreclosure across the United States.
Wow. Now that has a big impact not just on the real estate market, but on everything else, including everybody else's businesses. We don't have construction going on. We don't have, the service industries that go with the construction. What do you anticipate happening as a result of these mortgages being foreclosed?
Well, Kate, really, they're talking about it, and they're hinting to that we're going into a recession. The truth is we're going into a depression worse than 29.
How does the North American Union come into all this? Is there any connection whatsoever?
You have to look at what's going on around the planet. Like we got the euro, which has started. Roughly 70% of the Germans do not like it because they're basically carrying the load over there, so they want to get out of it right now, which will collapse the euro. The euro happens to be the second biggest basis of central banks around in the world right now. They're using their euro over the dollar. We've been replaced. Now there's other countries. The South American currency, the South American Bank has just started up, and they want to have their own. Meanwhile, everybody's dumping the dollar. We have all these unions, and that's where we come in with the North American Union. That's Canada, Mexico, and the United States. The problems involved with this thing, they cannot happen until we collapse the whole system as we know it. So you're going to have massive people walking in the streets.
And that's happened before, and it's not by mistake. From what we understand, the Federal Reserve is a big reason for this problem because they set interest rates. They've basically propped up the economy with this false housing boom. What else can we expect on the dollar side?
Well, the dollar side, they're pumping all kinds of money into the economy, but everybody that knows anything right now, they're not totally dumb, are not borrowing the money they're looking. The banks are trying to cover their derivatives, or what they consider their accounting. I've mentioned this on the air before. The biggest problem with derivatives, nobody can give you an accurate value of what it really is.
Yeah, I don't understand what derivatives are. I've tried many times to grasp that, and I still don't get it.
Well, the derivatives are... it's an offshoot. They create money. It's like if I pooled about 100 mortgages out of Las Vegas and I put them all together, and then I sold a package and say, this is my security, but I don't really have it. But, I may be the underlying bank, but I'll sell it to somebody else. That's a derivative.
Oh, gotcha. I gotcha now. Finally.
Okay.
Okay.
George, that went on, and it kept going up higher and higher. And we had companies that stepped in and say, hey, we'll insure that derivative. And so these people then moved it up and gave it a better credit rating, and all of a sudden all the pension funds have the money, and then foreign governments start buying it. So this is going to be a world meltdown.
George, this financial mess that we're in, what does it really mean, though, to the average person out there and to our viewers? I mean, life seems to just go on every day for these people, and they don't get it. Are they going to be rudely awakened very soon?
Well, Richard, I think it's going to be one Friday you're going to go to sleep and wake up Monday morning in a police state.
Really?
Because of the economy?
I talked to some bankers the other day. I don't know if you're aware of this, but most of the MasterCard and Visa and stuff goes through, frankly, Wells Fargo system, which laid it off to some other companies. And for 3 days, none of the credit cards would be able to work. Well, most people right now, even buying postage stamps, are using credit cards. Now, that's all going to come to a complete halt. So if you wake up one Monday morning and you can't use any currency that you have, because you might not even have it, you got a piece of plastic, there won't be any goods out here. Now, I also got notice, this week that I just talked to some of my friends, the Chinese are now telling the importers that we're getting things over there, they will no longer take dollars.
Mm.
And China has like a great deal of is propping up a lot of our dollars. I mean, the reason we even have an economy is because China, Japan, and a couple of the other large manufacturing countries are propping us up because we're buying their stuff. What happens when they don't take our money anymore?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and even the transportation is jumping up, Kate. So, the ships that come into the West Coast, for instance, they were charging $43,000 a day. That was the carrying charge to run freight, for instance, from China over the United States. They just jumped it to $83,000.
Something big is happening, George. Today, as we tape this show, as you probably know, Gold, and we've been telling our viewers about this for many years, has hit an all-time historic high, I think of $868 an ounce.
I think it was eight.
Richard, you're correct. What we're finding, however, is that people that you've advised people to buy gold, and the other people have too, and like I have, there is not a lot of gold in circulation, so go try to find some.
Yeah.
What's happening is the dealers will get it to you, but delivery may take them 3 or 4 weeks.
George, before we get to a break, do you have any ideas what gold is headed for? It may be a ridiculous question for you to answer, but what do you figure?
Well, within the next 90 days, I see it like oil going over to $140 a barrel, and I see gold going over 1,000.
Wow, I don't want to. And we just got a Hummer. We're going to have to take a commercial break, George. When we come back, I really want to get into the idea of how this financing has affected not only the real estate market, but also the financing of war. Because if the money runs out, how are they going to keep doing their war machine? Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with George Green. George, before we went on the break, I was concerned about this idea of financing the wars because they are still, beating the drums of war against Iran, and they're really like poking sticks at Russia by doing this. What do you see happening there? And if they continue this, where are they going to get the money for all these wars?
Well, obviously, the increase in taxes of the American people is the only way they can get it, Kate.
But how can they do that? Nobody's got any money. I mean, people literally don't have any money. What are they going to tax?
That's the reason why we're going to go into a tremendous depression. Since there's no money all the way around, and most people have borrowed their house equity clear up to the very top.
Yes. A lot of people are upside down with their houses because they refinanced them when the rates were artificially high, when the values were artificially high, and so they got this money on something that is now worth half or 2/3 as much.
Well, Kate, last week in Portland, Oregon, there was a real estate developer. His property, the bank took it, and they put it out on open auction, and they got about 40 cents on the dollar. This is a brand new project.
Wow.
George, do you think it's safe for our viewers to keep cash in the bank these days?
The problem is that the banks right now, this has all happened in the last week now, are limiting transfers of money outside of the country up to about $30,000. Individuals cannot buy over $5,000 worth of bonds, Series E savings bonds, in one calendar year. I don't know why they do it anyway. The interest return is so little compared to the inflation rate. Now, they're telling you the inflation is not right. It'll be, my calculations of inflation is over 20% for this coming year.
And why are they reporting to Homeland Security, a slightly different matter here, whether you withdraw or deposit more than $2,000 or $3,000? What business is it of the government's how much money you take?
Well, they're looking at what they call the terrorists get cash, and that's what they're looking at. I just happened to go to the bank and draw some money out on a trip that I'm getting ready to go for, and they're requiring people to fill out forms to get them.
For $2,500.
For $2,500. Some banks are just restricting it, period.
That's just,
And well, it was even worse than that, Kate, because I was talking about, wiring money out of the country, and they're talking about a $30,000 limit at one time, but that's putting money into other places. So they're trying to shut down this whole thing, getting ready for the collapse, and then enter into what you call the Homeland Security. And President Bush just signed the executive order about a month ago, putting all of our police underneath the military guidance.
That is terrifying because we know what happens when that occurs. We're basically under martial law.
That's right.
You said a few moments ago that Friday we'll go to sleep one night and wake up at a brand new week, and we will be under martial law, some kind of police state. Do you really think this will happen in the next year, George?
I expect, frankly, the next 90 days. I'm looking sometime between now and April. April is a real right now we have the politics, as you know, what's going on. Politics is, poly means many, and ticks are bloodsuckers. My sources are saying that the Rockefeller cartel want Obama in, but the Bilderbergers want Clinton in. So we have to see how the war comes out. Huh?
Now, Ron Paul, we talked about it briefly at the beginning of the show. Nobody is mentioning him, but anywhere that I've been lately, the only signs I see on lawns or on fences, Ron Paul Revolution.
And he's also raised, more money than anybody else.
$19 million in the last quarter, but how are they going to cover that up? What's going to happen if he, we don't know from the Iowa caucus today if he had any showing at all, but even if he did, would they actually allow that to happen?
No, they won't allow it to happen. Again, they control the media. You're coming back to the whole media stream. Remember some time ago when they had the Collier brothers put down vote scam on how they rigged the votes and how Putin said that we have a president right now that is done by the courts. Well, right now we're looking at the same position. The caucus is only one thing. Remember, we're on an electoral college system anyway, so the American people can be through this process where we say of all these things out there, but they're going to put who they want to in at the end.
Right. Now, I want to go back to...
You know what I fear, though? Sorry, Kate. You know what I fear, George? I fear that if Ron Paul somehow works through all this maze and does get on the national newscast, I think that somebody's going to whack him.
Well, I don't... Frankly, they have so much power. Ron Paul's been on all of the networks, as you know, and they've tried to cut him down. But and he does have the correct information. The problem is when you put somebody out on top and the anthill's rotten, what's going to make any difference?
That's true. What can he really change? For people who are concerned about their money, now, some of us have a little bit in the bank, and I actually talked to someone about transferring and buying maybe some euros or some Chinese yuan, and I was told I was not allowed to do that. Is that true?
No, it's not correct. There's a bank in Florida called Everbank. I'll give you Everbank, and you can pull them up on the internet. And they'll, on $5,000 amounts or more, they'll put you into a basket of currencies. Now, the bank is FDIC insured, whatever that means, but they are allowing people to do that.
Well, that's fortunate because I couldn't believe that we wouldn't be allowed to just buy Chinese currency.
Well, you can do it through the brokers, and they'll do it that way too. But if you want to have what I call the closest thing to physical, Everbank has got one way to do it. I'm still suggesting people get the old bags of junk silver, or dimes and quarters and that, because the current price on that is at spot price for the junk silver.
Right. You mentioned something about banks being, federally insured. George, do you know anything about this? Is it true that, yes, the banks are federally insured, but people think that if they have $50,000 in cash in the bank, that they are protected, but it's the bank that's protected, not the consumer. Is that correct?
It's not neither one. FDIC is a corporation. It's another name like Federal Reserve. It's another one of these things that people tell you that. The corporation's assets that guarantees the American people is upside down too. So when this comes undone and everybody's going to run around, trying to find some assets, it's like, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, there isn't any money behind this. The real accounting has put our country in massive debt, and foreign countries know this. The Russians are coming in. They bought all our steel companies. You've got even Brazil, which is actually better off economically from their central bank system, is loaning us money if you look at it. But what's happening is the United States is running by $2 billion a day is being added to the economy to keep, the war floating. That's, again, another diversion because of the oil. But I'll tell you what, the worst thing happened is the other day. I don't know if you know about this. Sears, Roebuck, and Kmart merged.
Yeah.
And they were, both of them ready to go into bankruptcy, but they were able to go to the retail market, if you want to, and get the loans to carry both of them. Well, they had a terrible Christmas, as you probably are aware. So I'm looking at the next step is when Sears and Kmart file bankruptcy, what do you think that's going to do to the American people's psyche?
Yeah, that's tough. That's going to be very tough.
How much time do we have before the break, you guys? 3 minutes, George. I want to move over to the North American Union. It's a subject on everybody's mind these days. We have countries of Canada, the U.S., and Mexico plotting some great big one-nation merge And, I mean, this is really going to happen. I understand that the Amero coin has already been printed, and it's waiting to go into circulation.
Yeah, it's out of the Denver Mint made them. It's kind of like the big wall that they were going to put up between now and, in Mexico along the border. As you know, they've only done basically 14 miles. And so that whole game that they're trying to put together, the problem is Mexico is so corrupt. I'm not saying that we're not corrupt, but they're so bad is what currency we're going to use, and they want to come out with that. What does it do to the American people with their own savings? It's going to be gone, as well as the pension funds. Everybody's relying on their pension funds, and all that money's been invested in this junk derivatives.
So say somebody had $10,000 in their savings account, and this Amero is suddenly instituted. What will they have in Ameros then? Will they just, be given like so much on the dollar, like 40 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar? How will that work?
Well, when I was with the people that were doing this stuff, frankly, we're just going to be lined up. You're going to go to the post office again and register, and you're going to get a new card, which is going to allow you some, whatever they call it, their rations to go on. But the dollar is going to be divided between those who have and the ones that don't. And the masses dollars are going to go away. It's kind of like the airline pilots that had their pension funds go away, right?
Right.
Same thing's going to happen to you with a dollar. So the illusion that you have that you own something, like you think you own a house or you own anything else, these are all property. Remember, this is a huge monopoly game, but somebody else owns the game.
Right.
Somebody once said to me, when you pay your car off, you get a certificate of title, and it's just that. It's a certificate or a copy of the title. You never actually get the real title.
That's
well,
right.
Richard, the problem is that I have the same thing. I'm talking to a lot of people that are trying to move money around to, keep themselves ahead of the game, so to speak, and that's what your listeners are about. Right now, the only... and I talked today, the only safe thing that I know people can put money into is gold and silver and hold the asset.
Right,
because
don't leave it in
I'm
a certificate.
predicting the market will collapse. I see the market dropping down to 10,000 or less sometime this year, and it should go back down to around 3,500 if there's a market trading at all.
All right, George, when we come back from the break, I want to finish up on the North American Union and get into something a little more horrific of martial law and citizen internment camps. Our guest is George Green, and Out There will return.
Okay, George, in a new book, Pat Buchanan recently said America is coming apart and the likelihood of her survival as one nation is improbable. The culture is collapsing and the nation is being deconstructed along the lines of race and class. Do you think that this is partially the reason that they've got these internment camps ready?
Partially. I think it's a question now, it's an economic base rather than, draw on the lines like Pat Buchanan said. It's a question now of who is going to be the dissidents, and the ones that are putting their name out on their front lawn right now, Ron Paul, automatically or frankly are labeled as one of the dissidents.
That's, I've heard that from a number of people now, and I mean, could it be that obvious that if you voted for anything other than a Republican in the last election or have a Ron Paul sign that you're actually being cataloged as a subversive? My God, George, what's happening?
They're doing that. They're registered. The little kids going to high school when they're junior or seniors in high school. All of the males are now being approached by the military, and if they agree to sign up, their families are receiving income. So they immediately go into the service when this is over.
Somebody told me as well, if you're online with MSN or America Online, you know how you fill out those little polls, straw polls, which is your favorite candidate, Ron Paul, Mitt Romney. Well, they're keeping track if you check all the little boxes on for Ron Paul.
That's correct.
It's got
that's like going to the library and checking out books. They've already had that in the paper. If you check out the wrong kind of books, they want your name.
This is leading somewhere that's, is going to be a rude awakening for millions and millions of Americans.
The national ID cards are one of those things, and a lot of people have said, I will refuse them, and over my cold, dead body, they'll, give me an ID or a chip or something. But realistically, what are you going to do if you don't have one, Ron?
Realistically, you won't have any food, so you're going to have to be bartering. So you better start learning to get material to barter. And yet they're limiting everything now, so you can only have like a few weeks supply of food. Anything more than that, you're against the security cord. So they're getting us all set up, and I think it's going to be this year, unfortunately, Kate.
Now, the chipping, have you heard any more? At one time we discussed the possibility of this chipping, and we had Catherine Albrecht on not too long ago talking about this. Have you heard anything from your insiders about the possibility of forcing these chips?
Well, forcing the cards?
No, the chips actually implanted in a person.
The RFID chip.
Yeah, well, no, this is what they talked about, and when I was talking to the people, they gave me, I have a copy of the New World Cash Card, and what it is, it would be activated by your thumbprint. Now, one of the things that were discussed about the chips is, if we're going to have people dying in the streets, what they are expecting, it's real easy to go take somebody else's chip.
Right.
Sure. Cut their arm off.
Wait a minute. Back up to the dying in the streets thing. And why are they going to be dying in the streets?
They're going to be people within the communities are being armed right now. The armed, if you want to call it, the thugs and the gangs. If you go down to L.A. and go into Watts area, there's different gangs. The Crips and the Bloods.
Sure.
Well, they're being given the guns in order to do this. So they're expecting, when we look at the television of what's going on over in Turkey or over in these other places, they're not being realistic. That's going to be happening here, and yet everybody says, oh, no, that's not going to be, happening. The truth is, if you don't have any food, you'll steal for food in 3 days. In a week, you'll kill for it.
Sure.
George, I have a copy of a document that I've taken right from a government website. This is Army Regulation 210-35, and it calls for a civilian inmate labor program. And this is from there, as you can see, folks, in the source HTML or website listing. This is from an actual military government website. This is real, George. They're not messing around here.
No, that's when 8 years ago when I was in Las Vegas, they asked me to build that enemy prisoner war camp. And I turned it down, but then recently, this last week, somebody sent me the picture of it. It's along I-15, and it actually labeled the sign of it, enemy prisoner war camp. My question is, who's the enemy?
Yeah, well, obviously, if you're voting for Ron Paul, you might be one of those. But also, maybe if you try to move your money out of the country, are they going to try and grab you then, too? I mean, there are so many reasons they might not like you and stuff you away in one of these places.
Again, the Global 2000 thing is to get a war started and get it over here, too, because they want to get a massive thing going to reduce the world's population, Kate. That's still the ultimate game.
Right. That was the next question.
We're showing a picture here of a what looks like a Halliburton KBR internment camp, and you can tell it's got the barbed wire going the other way for people to be kept inside. And that's not a federal penitentiary. That's definitely to keep some kind of dissident or subversive person.
But a way they would get people perhaps to go into these is again through surveillance, and we've talked a lot about surveillance on this show. The spy drones, the cameras everywhere. In fact, the United States and England are the top two most surveilled countries, but Canada and Australia seem to be a little lower on the list. Is it wise, do you think, to try to move someplace like that, George, or will it ultimately make any difference whatsoever?
There's going to be some places that are going to be safer than others. Right now, the people are moving to Latin America, even though it's politically, what we call some of the countries are unstable. They're all sitting back, and they know the American people are asleep, but even some of the insiders are moving down there. My CIA friend, I had one that called me the other day from Colombia. He says, don't believe the media. He says, we're okay. Yeah, we've got the skirmishes you're talking about, but we're fine. Well, so you guys are the ones that are in the internment camp up there.
Didn't the Bushes buy a lot of property in Paraguay? They must know something.
Well, that and down in Venezuela.
Yeah. Oh, but would that be a wise place for us to go, Venezuela?
Well, I don't know. I'm going to be in Ecuador this next week myself.
Maybe you can find a studio for us down there, George. And I mean, with satellite, we can uplink our show from anywhere.
Actually, I'm going down there with several people on that same thing because they're on the dollar right now, and I'm going to be with some of the officials of the government discussing because they're part of the group that have signed on to create the new, South American bank because they're concerned also.
So if they create a South American bank, that is even going to be more trouble for the American dollar.
Exactly. But remember, they've been using it, so what do you do? It's like Panama. It's the same thing. What do you do? And there's places in Panama that you can't go to because of the druggies, if you want to. All the Caribbean islands are all controlled by the druggies right now. So it's a question of where do you go where you can speak the language and be, either that or create a community with some kind of sanction with the government. You have to understand over here, you don't have any guarantee that you're going to own your house later. Who's going to guarantee title?
Right.
Do you ever really own your own home, George?
No, you don't. It's constructive right to use the airspace, subject to, you paying your taxes.
So
you may have the encumbrance paid off, but you're still paying taxes, which goes to whatever system.
So are you saying that after 25 years of holding a mortgage, you finally pay off your $400,000 home, it's still not technically yours?
No, not technically.
So
because they're using it, as you know, they're taking people's houses and tearing them down because they don't get enough taxes out of them.
Right.
People are being moved out. Just today, however, I ran across some people that are living in storage bins. You know, these where you put your storage in between moving?
Sure.
Right.
A little $40 a month. You got a little 10 bucks.
Right.
People are actually living in one. There's no heat or anything else.
Shame.
Things are getting desperate all the way across the country, but you're not hearing that.
I thought about that once.
Yeah, we actually did.
All right, our guest is George Green. His website is nomorehoaxes.com. We're going to tell you how to get a copy of George's handbook for the new paradigm after this break. Stay with us. All right, we're back. George, sorry, Kate, were you going to say something there?
You go.
We owe China like $1 trillion or so. Is there any indication that China would attempt to collect its debts in a more physical way, like an invasion of our country? Could that ever happen?
The Chinese military plan is to stand by and watch us get the war started in the Middle East, and then we'll use the rest of our assets up, and then they figure they'll walk over and take over the rest of the land. They figure that Canada and the United States have the correct feeding position to take care of their people. Their military says it's 5,000 years, and it's our turn now to rule the world. But they want to set back on it. And in regard to that, the chairman over there in Beijing told Bush, basically, he says, you don't know how many nuclear bombs we have.
Of course.
And they're picking on Iran because they might at some point in the next 5 years have nuclear capabilities. That's not
the nuclear. They already have it. Russia is putting in all that stuff. Putin went with Bush and told him, "You lay off." They had a meeting up at Kennebunkport just a couple months ago, and he says, "You don't do that." And he was so afraid of what Bush was going to do, he pulled out all of the scientists, the Russian scientists that were building the nuclear plants in Russia. Now they don't know what to do because Egypt now wants nuclear plants.
So I guess if Russia ever combined forces with China, I mean, the United States wouldn't have a hope in hell, would it?
Well, frankly, we don't at this point. Forget about what we're looking at now. It's a question of, is a possibility of these people doing the first strike on us.
George, how did we ever get to owe China so much money? I mean, it's not just billions. It's $1 trillion or $2.
Oh, $1.3 trillion. That's because we've been buying all the products. You and I go to the store. We want the cheapest thing we can. And because their labor was so inexpensive, I mean, I flew with these people. You can buy people for $1 a day to do the labor. And so we go out and you got to have your T-shirt that you're wearing, your pair of jeans, or your Nike shoes that cost, $2 to make, and you pay $80 for them?
Yeah.
All of this is all a consumption thing. And what happened is the government's attitude was, hey, we're going to let the people, we'll give them all the products they want. There's going to be a point where they have so much, now they're acquiring all the natural resources around the world, because it all comes down to where do you get the resources? Well, the countries that have the resources are now buying them, and over here they're even buying, as you know, our highways and everything else. We won't own anything, and we've exported all of our jobs. 90% of all the new engineers at PhDs are living in the Orient, and they're going to Oriental schools.
Speaking of highways, George, what do you know about the Super Corridor Highway that's going to run from Mexico City all the way up through the U.S. and branch out into Canada?
Well, they've started it, but they got stopped for funding again. It all come back to great ideas. That's the reason why the plans. It's like the underground facilities and stuff that they've made for themselves. Richard, here's the problem. They don't have any spare parts.
Yeah, but George, I mean, Mexican trucks, are rolling freely on what is going to be the superhighway already.
They're already running across the United States. The Mexican trucks already take the loads. That's part of the NAFTA deal. They run them all the way to Canada. So they're just trying to widen that, as you know, the highway to make it all the way up. But the problem is there's no money out here to do this at this minute.
But George, let's go back to what you said about no spare parts. Do you mean that everything's going to build like that amazing embassy in Iraq, that sort of thing? Is that where their spare parts are going?
Well, the embassy, that was the palace over there. No, I'm talking about the underground facilities. They're still planning a nuclear war in the Northern Hemisphere.
Did you hear something about these nuclear warheads that went missing several years ago, and they're just now looking for them again? Doesn't that sound kind of suspicious to you?
No, well, there's about 100 and some of them that come down through Canada. They're well aware of those, and most of those are aged, the nuclear things. Those are dirty bombs. Most of the bombs that, like Russia has and we do, are called neutron bombs. I sat in on the meetings. They were planning on using neutron bombs on the major cities. That gets rid of the people. And the radiation goes away in a few days. And what we have left then is just, edifices sitting there that are empty. I mean, these guys are insane. That's the reason why I backed out of it.
George, what can people do to get prepared and to cope with what's coming over the next year?
The first rule is to listen to your program to get as much information they can from all your guests on what's coming down. The next thing, get your family and yourself into what I call the observer mode, and that's part of the handbook that we give away to your listeners. And what it is to make you aware that this is a huge game and get yourself into balance, because it can be real frightening, terrifying, and you really don't have a solution other than to understand that it's being manipulated on everybody, and we're giving them permission to do it. Nobody's out here stopping it. I mean, I was in Washington. The rabble that runs in the street, 100,000 marchers, that's exactly what the guys in Washington say. Just the rabble in the street, they don't make any difference.
All right, so talk to me about this book you have. We have on the graphic that you're offering this handbook for the new paradigm free for those of our viewers who go to nomorehoaxes.com. It's a limited time offer, and you're going to send this book out to people who request it.
That's correct. We have a whole set of books, actually, Richard. There's 3 sets plus an extra one. And for something totally unique, if they buy all 3 books to your listeners only, we'll give them a copy of Aaron Russo's new movie, From Freedom to Fascism.
Oh, good. We think that's so important for people to understand the Federal Reserve and the income tax situation.
Right. Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express.
Right. But more solution, I mean, obviously getting your spiritual house in order. We've talked about that many times on this show, and getting your family together. People maybe need to understand that acquisition is not the route to happiness.
No, it's not. Things don't mean anything. Remember, we've set up a society. It's a question of wants and needs. You may want some things, but do you really need them?
Right. And sharing, I forget which one of our guests at one point said the most important thing that we can do is share, and even Pat Buchanan, although we certainly have many differences of opinion, he said get rid of the stuff you don't need, share, help people stay warm, give them food, because if you can't do that, what's the point?
Well, there's books out that gives people a lot of identification on how to do that. We have a new book that's actually in our catalog, and it's on that same thing, on how to prepare, get your food, your seeds, everything you need to do. Obviously, trading things, it's going to be hard for people to, the best trading thing is the old days. You had a case of whiskey, remember? and right now, of course, you'd have to have other things, but they're limiting everything. And if you notice, you go to the store, your cans are all, they have less contents in them.
They do have less contents, and I've noticed, and this is the first time I think in my life, I've really noticed that many things are missing off the shelves. You'll go in and there are empty spaces, and I hadn't seen that before in my lifetime anyway. So.
Well, they don't pay, they pay for space. The other thing is the ingredients they're putting into cans are killing people. The monosodium glutamate,
Sure.
the fluoride that's put into water and toothpaste.
We
Immediately goes to your, ductless glands, which is immediately dumbing down people. And people's temperatures are dropping by at least one degree, which means your body's working hard. They figured out a way to make us sick and killing us off slowly so they can make money doing it.
George, hang on with us. Our last commercial break is coming up. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with you and find out more about your book. This is Out There. Don't go there. George, Kate and I were talking during the break that if everybody watching the show tonight went to your website at nomorehoaxes.com and got a copy of your free catalog, and I'm going to get you to give us the number in a moment, but if people just took the time or the initiative to even read 1 or 2% of the books that you offer in your catalog, they're going to be so much more well-informed as to what's really happening on the planet right now.
Do you have a phone number for those people who do not have internet access?
Yeah, 800.
Yep.
729-4131.
800-729-4131. Get a free copy of the Handbook for the New Paradigm and also the catalog of books that George offers. And also, George, you did not too long ago a talk, and it's in a DVD set called The Big Picture. Tell our viewers a little bit about that.
That's 4.5 hours of DVD. That's me doing my lectures, and they put them together, and it shows the whole shabam of what's going on the planet. You get to see me, a little bit of my background. You get to see pictures of extraterrestrials, the extraterrestrial craft, how I found about that, all the information to tell you how you can get yourself prepared as much as possible.
George, Kate and I have been to one of your seminars, and I got to tell folks, you're riveting, and those 4.5 hours on that DVD set are just that way.
And
amazing
they go
work.
very fast. Before we went to the break, we talked a little bit about the stuff in our food. I think when I got one of your catalogs, or maybe it's on the front page of your website, there's a new book you have out. What is that? Something about food and how to look after yourself. That looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is a brand new. I didn't have it. The book is basically rave, and it goes into all of the food particles and everything that we're putting into our body and teaches you how to get what I call clean food. And it's a book. It's kind of like your book, Kate and Richard. It has a DVD in it, so you can watch the 2-hour summary of that.
Because I think most people don't even realize that the foods that they eat, the stuff they drink, even the air they breathe, of course, is a little dangerous. But there are ways to counteract that.
That's correct.
It's keeping people sick, George. Well, I mean, the food that people are buying in the supermarket, they know what they're doing.
You're exactly right. For a simple, people that get in colds right now, for instance, a sore throat, all they have to do is get liquid stevia and just gargle it, and your sore throat will go away in minutes.
Wish we would have known that a few days ago, because Richard had a heck of a cold this time.
Yeah, I still have it now.
Stevia.
Liquid stevia.
And
Well, we
Liquid
have
stevia.
stevia.
Try it, Richard. You'll be totally surprised.
Well, I'll do it when I get home. George, thank you for being on the program. We need to say goodnight to you and stay safe. Have a good time in Ecuador.
I'll find a studio for you.
Perfect. Okay,
That'd be
thanks.
great, yeah. With
Good-
satellite uplink, heck, we can go anywhere.
True.
That's correct.
Good night, George.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
George. All right, once again, to get a copy of George's book called Handbook for the New Paradigm, go to nomorehoaxes.com. Fill out the appropriate information, and it'll be sent right to your house. That's
And
a pretty good deal.
it
free
is
of
a very
charge.
good deal.
And he's
And-
also paying for the shipping.
That's true. Next week, we have Michael Horn, who is the American spokesperson for Billy Meyer, who is perhaps one of the most famous contactees on the planet. And he has a great deal to tell us about what the Pleiadians are sharing with Billy Meyer about the future of the planet.
Yeah, a lot, much more than just a simple UFO show. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. And remember, the truth is out there.